Okay, so here we are. Um, as I mentioned, today we are talking about the vaginal microbiome. I'm Dr. Krystal Lynn Couture. My business is called the Pelvic Acu. And our mission at the Pelvic Acu is really to empower acupuncturists to successfully and sustainably treat pelvic health clients and conditions. And I say successfully and sustainably because we want to help our clients to transcend the pelvic health that their issues that they're having over their lifetime, right? So if someone is coming in, for instance, with leakage or sexual dysfunction, and we help them for a short period of time, or, a portion, a season of their life, but that doesn't continue on, then we're not treating them sustainably. So, our mission is really to get into sustainable care for those pelvic health clients. And honestly, that's the reason that I started the Pelvic Acu. It was because so many modalities that are out there for pelvic health are falling short. And these clients were coming to me before I even really specialized in pelvic health. These clients were coming to me for help and saying, hey, this helped for like 6 weeks and then it didn't help anymore. And, or it got me to this point, right? Got me to this point, but it couldn't get me any further. And these clients wanted to go further, and rightfully so. And then as I found the ways in which acupuncture can help clients, which when we look at that is really our positioning. We know about biomedicine. We know about organ and system patterns. We know about the spiritual emotional aspect, right? When we bring all of this together, we finally have an opportunity to help pelvic health clients, to help really so many different types of clients, but we're talking about pelvic health here, to help pelvic health clients have sustainable results. And sustainable results are amazing. So as we get into the biomedicine, right? We look at a sports medicine model or a Western medical model to find out what the musculoskeletal dysfunction is. And we can address that through the specific muscles themselves, through the sinews, and really what's happening within sort of the Wei Qi level, the external parts of the body, right? And then we go deeper. We go into our use of our TCM diagnostics and our TCM pattern skills to find out what's happening within the organ, what's happening within the organ systems, what's happening, how the organs are communicating with each other, right? And then we can address those meridians and organs through TCM. And then on top of that, many of us have training that allows us to get into the spiritual emotional aspect. And spiritual emotional component of pelvic health is paramount. Okay. The pelvis is the root of the body, period. Beyond that, we have so much emotion that is stored in the pelvis, right? The pelvis is like a bowl. It's literally a place where things can get caught and things can get stuck. We have multiple joints that connect to the pelvis, right? We have the SI joints, we have the sacrococcygeal joint, we have the pubic bone joints, right? And then we have the hips in there. So there's a lot of places where things can get stuck and trapped. And I find that being able to bring that emotional support is super duper important. Now, with all of that said, in my classes, I teach all of these things, which is awesome. And I love the way that I teach it. At the same time, the medicine as it translates through your heart, through your hands, through your needles, through your herbs, whatever it is that you're doing becomes your medicine. So I want you to take what it is that is really resonant with you in this moment, take it, make it yours, and share that with your clients. Send that ripple out into the world. What doesn't resonate with you isn't going to be part of your medicine. And that's okay. That's what makes us each unique. With 33% of women and 16% of men experiencing pelvic pain or pelvic dysfunction on a regular basis, there are plenty of clients for all of us to help, right? So here's some statistics specific to the vaginal microbiome. 50 to 60% of women experience a UTI in their lifetime. 30% of women have bacterial vaginosis. This statistic was actually in the United States specifically, but that number was up to 50% in other countries. 3.7 million women in the United States have trichomoniasis. That's a lot, right? That's a bigger number. And that's one of the microbiome disorders that's actually less than many of the others. And then 75% of women get one yeast infection within their lifetime. 45% have two or more. Okay, so vaginal microbiome issues, to just be really simple about it, are pretty prevalent. And it's important for us to know that if we're working with pelvic health clients, because these things are going to come up. So recently, there are studies that are coming out about the microbiome. And this one in particular, I really liked the definition that they used to describe the vaginal microbiome. Vaginal microbiome is an intricate and dynamic microecosystem that constantly undergoes fluctuations during the female menstrual cycle and the woman's entire life. A healthy vaginal microbiome is dominated by lactobacillus, which produce various antimicrobial compounds. Okay, so I love that this definition talks about the microbiome as something that is dynamic, something that is changing, something that evolves with the seasons of life and the seasons throughout one cycle on a monthly basis. So this is a really nice Western perspective that I think is almost poetic in how it's written. And it reminds me so much of how we think of things in Chinese medicine. Um, and it's good for all of us if Western doctors are starting to understand the vaginal microbiome with more sensitivity and more understanding of its complexity. So I want to talk about pH in the body, just for reference here. So, and because I find it compelling and interesting, since we are going to talk about the pH of the vaginal microbiome itself, the pH of the brain is 7.1 to 7.2. Of the heart is 7.0 to 7.4. Skeletal muscle tissue is a little bit more acidic, 6.9 to 7.2. Bone is one of the most alkaline, which is 7.4. Skin is actually much more acidic. It's 4.7 to 5.7. Blood, 7.3 to 7.45. Urine can be 4.6 to 8.0. So there's the most variation in the pH of urine versus anything else in the body, which I thought was really, really interesting. And I think that has a lot to do with what's happening in the, vaginal microbiome, the vaginal ecosystem. Could also have to do with the penile ecosystem, right? As well as the foods that people are taking in. So I think that's why there's so much variation there, but good to know just the same. And then gastric secretions from the stomach are 1.5 to 3.5. So they're very acidic in nature. And just on that, this is a little bit off topic, but I feel like it's important to say right now. So often, clients that are coming in with reflux type disorders think that they have too much acid within their system. But what research is actually showing is that the acid of the gastric secretions is actually not high enough. And that's because in order for the epiglottis, the little valve, to close and open, it's actually modulated by the acidic nature. So something too alkaline, an environment that's too alkaline is actually going to cause that valve to not open and close appropriately. So sometimes acid is actually the trick to treating this properly. If you have a client that has, this type of condition and is not responsive to the omrazopral or those other type of medications, or just doesn't want to take them, it may be worth having them go a little deeper with their GI to really see if they can make changes. I've worked with a lot of clients in this case, and particularly pregnant clients, actually. And we've been able to use diet to really help to bring in a little bit more acid so that they're having less of their reflux condition. Now, why is this connected to the pelvic floor and why am I talking about it? Because if there's a confusion of chi, right? If that stomach chi is ascending when it's supposed to be descending, we've got a problem, right? Because then the spleen chi is not going to do what the spleen chi is supposed to do, which is ascend, right? So there's a proprioceptive confusion. When we have that proprioceptive confusion, the pelvic floor becomes proprioceptively confused, which means it's ascending when it's meant to be descending and vice versa. Now, if you've done any of my classes, including my intro, which is a free class, we talk about the pelvic breath, which goes into detail of the ascending and descending of the pelvic floor. But alas, back on topic for today. What is the vaginal pH? Well, the vaginal pH normally is considered slightly acidic. It is 3.8 to 5.6. Typically we see that more like 3.8 to 4.5, but 5.6 is still considered normal. Now, lower pH value, there's a lower pH value in the vagina than in the blood or in the interstitial fluids. And this actually protects the vaginal mucosa from pathogenic organisms. The body is really, really smart. One, it's always looking for homeostasis and balance. And two, it's always looking for ways to protect itself. So it has these natural mechanisms inside to protect itself. The vaginal pH value is age dependent. So during the reproductive age for women, we see the pH lower. We see it 4.0 to 4.5. Whereas during menopause, it's a little bit more alkaline in tendency. These are averages. We've seen, everything all over the spectrum, but what we're really looking for is to fall within that average range of 3.8 to 5.6. Now, a higher pH, so too alkaline, actually creates the risk for infection. A lower pH, so too much acid, is really a component in reduction of fertility. So it's important for us to be aware of with our fertility clients as well. So just for fun, I wanted to throw out there some foods that had pH that was similar to the vaginal microbiome. Now, these are not necessarily suggested foods for eating. They could be if they, fit with someone's pattern, etc. But I did think it was interesting. So a tomato is going to be 4.2 to 4.9. Olives, particularly green olives, are going to be 3.6 to 3.8. Mandarins, 4.0. Mangoes, 3.9 to 4.6. Nectarines, 3.9 pH. Buttermilk was 4.5. And that was actually the closest dairy to any of the vaginal microbiome averages, because dairies tend to have a more alkaline pH in them. So the exception there was buttermilk. Grapes, 3.4 to 4.5. So that's another close one. And blackberries, 3.2 to 4.5. Other berries also fell into the category, but I just wanted to list one. Now, surprisingly, I didn't know this. I'm not much of a meat or fish eater, but meat and fish tend to have a much more alkaline pH as well. I also thought it was interesting. A lot of these foods like tomatoes, olives, grapes, blackberries, mandarins, nectarines are foods that grow in Mediterranean climates. And when I was looking at, kind of the global perspective of disorders of the vaginal microbiome, I saw lower numbers in Spain and Italy and France and those areas. So that was of interest. Okay, so let's go into this little chart here. I love this chart. I actually have it saved, I printed it out and saved it and like laminated it with tape, so I have it in my office so that I can refer to it easily. So if we have a pH of 3.8 to 4.4, we shouldn't have any symptoms and we should have a balanced pH. However, if we have a pH of 3.8 to 4.4 with symptoms which include itching, burning, odor, and discharge, this is typically going to be signs of a yeast infection or thrush. If we have a pH of 4.5 or more, and then we have itching, we have an unpleasant or fishy smell, and we have a white to grayish discharge, this could be an indicator of bacterial vaginosis. If we have a pH of 4.5 or more and we have pain on urination, a mold-like smell, abnormal foamy to yellow greenish discharge, this is typically related to trick. So now we're going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So let's start off with yeast infection, okay? So yeast infections are marked by itchiness, redness, swelling, and pain during urination or sex. Typically, we see a normal pH 3.8 to 4.4. The discharge is going to be thick, it's going to be white and curd-like. That cottage cheese-like discharge is really common with yeast infections, though it's not always present. The other thing to remember here is that there's typically no odor. Okay, so our Chinese medicine diagnosis that we often see is damp heat that's associated with yeast infections. This means that there's excess heat in the body and too much moisture that is accumulating in the lower jiao, right? Too much moisture accumulating, nowhere for that moisture to go. That's typically what we see for yeast infection. Now, of course, as with anything, any pattern can lead to any level of dysfunction, and there is no 100% guarantee. But we're just going for what's the most common here. Now, if we look at bacterial vaginosis is often connected to itching, especially after sex, and burning on urination. But there are a significant number of bacterial vaginosis cases that are asymptomatic. Okay, so no symptoms at all. There may just be a slight odor. I see this one a lot in my clinic. And actually had a client who came in probably about 2 weeks ago now, who said, I was diagnosed with bacterial vaginosis long time ago, 10 years ago. She's through menopause now, past retirement age, actually. And she's like, I'm pretty sure I still have it because I have this odor. No other symptoms, just this odor. And I want to treat this. It's like, okay, great. Let's get into it. She's been my client forever, but sometimes it takes a long time for clients to feel safe enough to share something like this and do so without feeling shame, and without feeling like something is wrong with them or they did something wrong, right? So with bacterial vaginosis, we see a pH of 4.5 or greater. The discharge can be off-white, grayish, or green. And the odor is very specific. It is that fishy odor. Now, in Chinese medicine, we often see bacterial vaginosis show as a combination of spleen qi deficiency and damp heat. This damp heat and the spleen qi deficiency yields a decrease in the good vaginal bacteria. So what we need to do is build back up the good vaginal bacteria so that there's not an overgrowth of the bad vaginal bacteria, right? Okay, so let's talk about trichomoniasis. Trich has symptoms like vaginal itching and burning and pain during urination. It also can be asymptomatic. It has pH of 4.5 or greater. The discharge here is yellow to green froth or foam. The discharge is very specific, and typically we will see that discharge even if they don't have the itching, burning, and pain. They just have this really odd discharge, right? And it's frothy, it's foamy, and they'll describe it that way because that will be what they experience when they wipe or in their underpants. So in the Chinese medicine world, this is really often associated with, again, spleen qi deficiency and dampness. Dampness and spleen qi deficiency make the body susceptible to these external pathogens. External pathogens come in, they find this nice warm-like cave to live in, and they just want to hang out there if it's got the right pH. So we need to rebalance the pH and obviously get the dampness down, get the dampness drained in their body. Now we're talking about urinary tract infections, okay? Urinary tract infections are characterized by a strong urge to urinate that doesn't go away. It also is associated with burning or itching of the urethra. And pelvic pain is actually also really, really common. Now, I would say this caveat from clinical experience. In those still menstruating, I see these symptoms really, really common. Beyond those who are menstruating, so those who have gone through menopause, what I see is less of the urge to urinate and the burning and the itching of the urethra, and more the pelvic pain and the flank pain in the back with exhaustion. And in the elderly, I often see confusion in particular. So this is something really, really important because UTIs can go bad for elderly clients really, really fast. And of course, they're guilty of not drinking enough water, right? So if they've got this pelvic pain that's come on rather suddenly, they've got a little bit of flank pain and they seem like they're a little confused, that's a great sign to have them do a culture for a UTI. So we often see that the urine here is really the key to helping us understand what's happening. It's dark, cloudy, and it could even be bloody with a strong odor. The pH can be any with a UTI. The discharge can be any. And there's typically not a vaginal odor. It's the odor of the urine specifically. So that can certainly be hard to discern. But one question that I ask often is, do you tend to smell a strong odor coming from the toilet after you urinate? And they'll say yes, and that's a good sign that it's the urine rather than the vaginal odor. So in Chinese medicine, what we often see as our diagnostic pattern is kidney yin deficiency with damp heat. The deficiency of kidney yin is going to lead to decreased cooling yin and fluids, right? And as I said, very often this is about the internal environment and what's coming from the outside in with foods and water in particular. Hydration is a big, big factor here. And then, in that younger population, I feel like this strong urge to urinate. My cat once had a UTI. And so I give this example a lot. And it was like he would go to the litter box, and he'd come out of the litter box and he'd go back to the litter box, and nothing would really happen. So he'd come out and he'd go back again. And sort of that repetitive nature. It tends to be a light way to talk about it with clients. And I feel like that's really important as we try to talk to clients about this, to have these difficult conversations about their health with them, right? So it's like the cat returning to the litter box repeatedly without feeling satisfied. That's a good sign of a UTI. Okay, so lactobacilli, right, is the common species within the vaginal microbiome that produces our acidic pH and the bacteriocins to kill other bacteria in the vagina. It is designed to protect women from STDs and opportunistic infections. If these normal flora, such as lactobacilli, are absent or significantly reduced, the vaginal ecology becomes compromised and imbalanced, and other microorganisms or bacteria may become overgrown. Then we can have things like vaginitis and other conditions that are starting to come in, which is really problematic over time. So what can we do, right? How can we take shame-free action to help our clients? Well, the first thing is, to really listen. If we have clients that are coming in for pelvic pain and they're talking about the vaginal microbiome, well, that's great. Check, check, check. But not everybody is going to be coming in admitting that they have pelvic pain. Not everybody's going to come in wanting to talk about the vaginal microbiome, right? Some people feel really uncomfortable for that. And there's still some stigma associated with talking about vaginal health. So there are a few things that we can do and recommend that can easily help clients to understand what's going on. And the first is actually vaginal pH strips. You can buy these through any of the medical suppliers that you have that you would buy gloves from, or if you're in a state where you can do injections, those suppliers usually have them. Even Amazon has them now. And what I do is I use the 6-inch sterile Q-tip strips. I have them at my office. I have the client do this as a self-test. So they can go home with their pH strip and their sterile Q-tips and test at home. They can also do it before they get onto the table. Very often my clients are taking all of their clothes off before they get onto the table. So it's really easy for us to just, transition from having our chat in the chair to setting them up so that they can do a test. Then once they get onto the table, most clients like this because then I can look at the strip and see what color is this strip versus the pH colors and notice, is this within the normal range or is it out of the normal range, right? And then we can sort of make a plan from there. So they're great. They're a really inexpensive investment for either your clinic or if your clients to take home. Clients can do them at home and send you a picture. That also works. Of course, then there's the, what's the lighting like and how's the color, blah, blah, blah. So it's really up to you how you do that. If you are specializing in pelvic health, this is, you're going to have the clients stripping down anyway, and you'll keep them covered. Of course, you'll be out of the room when they're doing that. But it's very possible to integrate this into your practice, and it's not something that takes a lot of time. You can encourage your clients to eat foods that are rich in lactobacilli, right? So foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, tempeh, miso, all of those foods are actually rich in lactobacilli. So that's an awesome, awesome thing to encourage for these clients to eat a small portion on a daily basis. So for my client that came in a couple weeks ago with the bacterial vaginosis, it was like, hey, where are you at with your diet? And we kind of talked about things, and she had been eating kimchi or sauerkraut every day for a while and then recently had stopped, which is like, oh, okay, so perhaps this was a little bit dormant and now we're seeing it again with the diet. So she's back on the sauerkraut on or kimchi on a daily basis, and just a tablespoon. Like, you don't need a lot of it. Fermented foods, with the lactobacilli are a great addition. Can also recommend supplements. I should preface all of this with saying, if there's something that is a huge red flag, there's an active infection going on, there's an active bacterial condition, and this client is really having a struggle, they need to be referred out so they can have cultures and that kind of things done. And they may or may not need to have a Western medical intervention, if that's their choice. But for our general client base that is not going through something like that, you can also recommend supplements. And there are vaginal specific probiotics, which can be taken orally. There are also suppository versions. I find that my clients tend to do better with the oral supplement simply because they can be more compliant. They're really, really easy to take. It's just a small little pill. You take it with your vitamins in the morning, and that's it. They can be really compliant with that. Where with a suppository, there tends to be, more things to deal with, including the discharge from the suppository, the time to apply it, consistency, all of those things. So I like this brand Vitanica. It is on FullScript if you have a FullScript account, and it's called Fem Ecology. They do have a particular yeast infection suppository that if someone does have a yeast infection going on, that suppository is actually really, really effective. So that's what I recommend for supplements. You can go crazy with supplements here, but that's a good starting point. I also always recommend like loose fitting pants and underwear and not wearing thongs. This is so, so important for helping the vaginal ecology to cleanse itself. If we are creating a tight, warm, or hot environment, that is not going to help with these damp heat type conditions, right? And then soaps and scented products are one of the worst things because the microbiome has its own ability to cleanse itself. Adding soaps or scented products is absolutely going to alter that and unfortunately make it more difficult for the good bacteria within the vagina to do what it's meant to do, which is keep that environment in an optimal state, right, for reproduction. And then, of course, encouraging clients to wipe from front to back. The vaginal microbiome and the rectal microbiome are not compatible. Okay, so that really concludes the primary portion of the vaginal microbiome. I'll ask questions in just a sec. If you are interested in learning more and learning my hands-on needling techniques, then you can join me. I am full in my next two practicals, which are in Seattle and in Maine, but in Phoenix, Arizona, we are not full yet. So I would love to have you, if you're from that area, to join me. In 2026, we're going to be in Colorado once again and California, as well as I think Maryland or Virginia, the DMV area. So I'm really excited about that. And if you're not already following me on Instagram, let's connect. I would love to. I am at the Pelvic Acu. On Facebook, we have a group. It's called the Pelvic Acupuncture Collective Group. Sometimes people post case studies there, ask questions about different products that exist. There was recently an awesome question about postpartum abdominal binding. So that was really great. And then if you want to learn more about what I have to do, I'm thepelvicacu.com. I am one of those people. I love to give you as much information as I possibly can because I want you to be successful in your practice as you bring pelvic care. Your success helps the success of the whole.